Kanaly, this is great to be chatting with you. And you did mention before we came on that you're kind of a Zoom virgin. You've Zoomed with your family, but not any professional sense. So fingers crossed it all goes well.
Yeah.
Look, I know right now there are Dallas fans all around the world fizzing with excitement. Ray Krebs is in the house.
Well, there's a lot of them out there, I think. I still hear from them all the time. The mail comes to the house and people contact me in various ways. It's amazing how long the show has held the interest of all those fans.
But before we spin back to South Fork Ranch and all of those wonderful Dallas stories that I know you have, Steve, you worked as a radio operator during the Vietnam War. So tell me how from there you became involved in Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now movie.
I came home from the service and a year in Vietnam in the jungle and finished my army. I had about 3 months left. And then I went back to college, and I was looking, and I'm supporting myself, and there was a job opportunity that I was recommended to. It was running a gun club where we shoot, trap, and skeet, and I have a long-standing background in that. Well, we opened this club, and one of my clients was a young writer from USC named John Milius, and we became friends. And John was writing a screenplay he'd been contracted to write about Vietnam, and it was Apocalypse Now. And John was very interested in knowing my experiences with a combat unit and air assaults with helicopters and so forth. And that's where I contributed to that movie in the writing stage, but never as a film, as it was made 10 years later.
Is this true? Your experiences had a lot to do with crafting Robert Duvall's character?
Yeah, I had a commanding officer that came in sort of towards the end of my tour, and he was very colorful, and he wore a Western hat, and he didn't like any of the call signs. So he threw them all out the window, and he says, I'm going to make this company cartridge case, and this one's going to be Winchester, and this one's going to be Remington. And he was Big Duke 6, and he had this big persona. And you know, the Duvall character is sort of, going off in that direction, throwing in John Milius's passion for surfing.
Yes.
And you mix it all together, and it's a little bit of each.
Oh, yes, his passion for surfing. Big Wednesday, of course, which we'll talk about, is a movie that he kind of got together, and you starred in with Jan Michael Vincent and Gary Busey and so many others. We will come to that. From there, though, Steve, and this is quite the quantum leap, you were discovered by the great John Huston and wound up in that 1972 movie, The Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean.
Well, what actually happened was John Milius was continuing to write screenplays, and he wrote another really good one. We were close friends at this point, and I would read everything that he wrote. And this is a Western. I loved this Western. It was about a real character, Roy Bean, and he's looking to direct his first film. Well, he got bought out. Paul Newman said, "That's very nice. We'll give you a lot of money, but I want John Huston to direct." So Milius said, "Well, if you're going to have Huston, then I want to be on the show as the writer in residence." And through John Milius, I was introduced to John Huston. And funny story, I'm an art major in college. I'm doing finals. I have been working and up late for days and days. I'm really kind of covered in pain. I got a dog with me, and my father says, "They've been looking for you for 3 days. They want you at Universal Studio today for a meeting with John Huston." I said, "Well, if I were you, I'd go, just go." And I said, okay. So I go over to Universal in a beat up truck and all my beat up clothes with my dog. And I go into these posh offices, and here's John Huston, who I greatly admire as a director. And we sit down and we talk about shooting and hunting and dogs and Alaska and this whole list of things. And he finally says, "Well, Steve, what do you think about being in the movie?" how would you like to play a part in the movie? I said, Mr. Huston, if you don't care if I've never done this before, I'm game and I want to give it a try. He says, wonderful, then. Let's all have a drink on it, boys. And so he tells the producer, John Foreman, John, go over and get some drinks for us. And that was it. So I didn't know exactly what I was getting into. I never was in a play of any kind or any shape. And, but I had this thing. I said, well, I like the movie. I like Westerns. I'm an artist. I have a feeling I can do this. And the worst thing that could happen to me is they'll fire me. They cannot send me back to Vietnam. And so I felt I had the confidence. I'm 24 years old. I'm gonna take this chance and go out there. And long story, I'm sorry, I'll continue here for briefly. I had a 1 week guarantee. I didn't even know what that meant, but I better deliver. Anyway, I was on the picture for 12 weeks, it turned out. And from beginning to the end, learned an incredible amount about filmmaking, about acting, and about everybody else's job. I was into everybody's department to learn about camera and makeup and the equestrians and the lighting. And when it was all over, it was like this 12-week great course that I had. I made about $10,000. It's more money than I'd seen in my life at that point. And Paul and John Huston both said, hey, you did a pretty good job, kid. You know, if you want to have a career, you might have a shot at it. So I decided to go.
What a masterclass, though, for you.
Yeah.
Think about his astonishing body of work. Movies like Keough, The Ashfeld Jungle, Night of the Iguana, The Misfits, African Queen. You must have kind of pinched yourself.
It was really an unbelievable experience. And just to be in that picture for those 10 or 12 weeks was a fantastic experience. And you know, I was with John Huston many times, and we had some personal things that we did together. He liked shooting, for instance. He liked to go hunting. Mm-hmm. So John Milius and John Huston and I all did that together a few times. And you know, he was one of the great old time directors. One morning we went out there to go hunting, and he's still in bed. He's living in a trailer at the set way down south of Tucson. And he goes, oh, it came to me in a dream last night. Milius says, what's that? He says, the ending. So this is going to happen and that's going to happen. And Bean comes back and we don't know if he's really alive or if he's not. And then he goes up in flames. And all of a sudden there's like this huge rewrite involved that we think, is this really going to happen? Well, he had the power to make it happen. John Milius went to work. It changed the whole ending of the movie, and you know, added, I don't know, another $1 million to the production cost. No doubt.
What was it like working with that extraordinary cast in the life and times of Judge Roy Bean? I mean, there was Paul Newman, for starters, the beautiful, sultry Jacqueline Bisset. I think even Ava Gardner was tucked away somewhere there too, wasn't she?
Yeah, Ava came in for a little cameo at the end. For me, I was just the kid, you know, the guy there soaking up as much as I could. I have to say that, you know, many of the character actors that I worked with along the way were very generous and shared ideas with me. Like Tony Perkins one day said, I was intimidated about going into a soundstage to record voiceovers. He says, oh no, Steve, look at you go now. You don't have to worry about how you look or the cameras or the lights or anybody else. You just go in there and just think about your voice and get it just the way you want it. So those kind of lessons were just coming at me left and right from all the wonderful people that were a part of that show.
And from there, of course, your career just kind of took off. 1973, Dillinger, a wonderful movie, and you played Pretty Boy Floyd, who I must say met a rather dramatic end, didn't he? Speaking of hunting and shooting and all of that stuff.
Well, this turns out to be Milius's debut as a director. Mm-hmm. He finally gets the project, and it's with a kind of a B-movie studio, and with a very low budget of $1 million. he shoots this film on location in Oklahoma in 6 weeks. And he brings in Ben Johnson, and he uses Warren Oates as a lead actor, and Warren had not played lead roles up to that point. And I'm kind of a new guy. He knows Spielberg, and so he gets Richard Dreyfuss to come in and play a cameo, Machine Gun Kelly kind of character.
Yes.
And Michelle Phillips was somehow connected to Milius, and she comes in for her debut role.
Yeah, I know, fabulous.
All these little elements coming together in this, what I think is a charming, fun movie about a true story. And he follows the facts pretty closely in the story, I think. And certainly the character I played that's just how he went down, a stream of bullets in a field.
Yeah. And the great Cloris Leachman, of course, she too was in the mix.
Yeah. Somehow they were able to pull strings and convince Cloris to come in for, 2 or 3 day part. Nice part, but just a brief part.
You think about it, Steve, over your many decades now in the biz, you've worked with some absolute greats. Henry Fonda on 2 occasions. There was My Name Is Nobody, and then you got to work with him again, and the great, now sadly late, Charlton Heston in Midway, the Battle of Midway. What was Henry Fonda like to work with? Because he was one of those great old-time Hollywood movie stars.
The film that I actually worked with him closely on, he was a big grouch. And this was an Italian movie. My Name Is Nobody.
Yes.
I'm a bad guy in the beginning of the movie, playing a barber, and we're doing this shaving scene over and over and over, and again, his skin is getting irritated. He's not happy working for the Italians. We're on location in New Mexico, and he was just grumpy. And I never got close to him, honestly. But I certainly admired him and his career over the years. And I have to say something. You mentioned Charlton Heston. Charlton Heston did something that was really unique and that I really appreciate today, and did then too. He went on a tour in Vietnam. It was called a handshake tour. And he would go to distant landing zones that were definitely beyond the safe zone. And land and walk around the perimeter and introduce himself and shake hands with everybody and say, thanks for your work, and we appreciate what you're doing. So not very many actors I know would have been willing to do that, but he was. And when I had a chance to work on Midway, I did have one day when we were all on the same set, and I was able to thank him personally again for that special thing that he did when I was in Vietnam. It's the only U.S. show I ever saw the whole time I was there. It's
amazing, isn't it, Steve? So many stories about Charlton Heston, and they all point to him being just an absolute utmost gentleman.
Yeah, he was great. And but just to be in that movie, the Battle of Midway, if you look at the credits on that thing, it's really quite amazing. And that I'm part of that list is I take some pride in.
The Sugarland Express, of course, with the wonderful Goldie Hawn. And this is significant because it was Steven Spielberg's movie debut, as in big screen debut. I mean, he'd done Duel, of course, and an episode of Night Gallery, those for television. But here he is bursting out onto the big screen. What are your memories of making that movie and, of course, working with Steven Spielberg?
I got to know Steve pretty well over the years, but I had never met him prior to this first meeting I had that was arranged by John Milius, once again for me. At Universal Studios, I went over, and Steve's got a big, beautiful office, and we went over. I think I had my dog with me again, and we're all talking about trap shooting and skeet shooting, and then he says, "Well, there's a part in the movie if you want to do it. It's nothing big, but it runs the length of the picture." And I said, "Oh, yeah, well, count me in, because I'm just learning and I'm ready to go to work." So it was a nice role, and I got to work with Ben Johnson. And once again, I was on a 3 or 4 month big studio production and picking up a paycheck and learning as I worked. So that was the goal. I think I did 5 films before I ever did any television. Milius used to say, well, we don't make movies fast enough here. Your friends are one thing, but you need to do some TV or some commercials to fill in on when we're not making movies.
We referenced, of course, Big Wednesday when we began our chat. Jan Michael Vincent, there was William Catt, Gary Busey. You played Paddy D'Arbanville's husband, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
You know what I think, Steve, and I'd love your observations of this. Jan Michael Vincent, he was just one of those, he had such a charisma. And his sad death, I think, was about 2019. Just so awful. Did you two remain in touch over the years?
No, I was never close to Jan Vincent, but we would run across each other from time to time. That was Milius's homage to Malibu, and he loved surfing, and this was his story basically, and. There was a lot of fun actors in it. I took a one-day role because I just wanted to keep my string alive and being in Milius movies.
Yes.
And so I played this husband that he doesn't expect to see when he opens the door. And but I like that movie. I think the movie has a lot of heart. And I knew all those young actors that were in it, and it was a good movie.
And you look back at it now, and it really does just stir the emotions, doesn't it, of that time with the Vietnam War and that surf culture of Malibu and so forth.
Yeah, I don't ever drive by Malibu without thinking about that movie.
Well, television was obviously on your cards because 1978, and along comes Dallas, a little show which went on to become one of the highest rated in television history and all over the world. I read somewhere, Steve, you were considered for 3 roles. There was J.R. Ewing, there was Bobby, and then there was the role that you personally preferred, and that was of Ray Krebs. Is that right?
Yeah, the agent said there's 3 male roles you could possibly play. They haven't made up their mind about anybody yet. And I took the drive to Warner Brothers, and the office was full of a lot of young blonde girls that were there reading for the Lucy role, and I knew one. And I said, could I just peek at a script? Because I have a meeting coming up, and I haven't seen anything about it yet. Yes. And I open it up, and oh my gosh, this guy, Ray Krebs, is in the hayloft with this girl, Lucy. Oh, and then his former girlfriend is marrying the son of the ranch. Oh, and he runs this. He's the he's the foreman of the ranch. Oh, and he flies a helicopter. Oh, and he's going to do this with the other lead girl in it. It's all in the first episode. And it's this Western. And I'm going, man, this is as close as I'm going to find to a Western on television today. And I went in and with that in mind. And I said, I'm very interested in the role of Ray Krebs. I don't know what you were thinking about, but and they said, well, yeah, okay, well, have a script and come back in a couple of days. So I came back in character. With clothes I actually wore in the show for the first several episodes. They called that night and they said, hey, let's make a deal. And the next thing you know, we had a group read through. This was pretty funny. I hope you don't hear that too much, but I was on a commercial and everybody else was there and I'm late, and I get to Warner Brothers and I finally get to the office and everybody's seated. They all have scripts. They're all acquainted with each other now. Larry Hagman later said he thought I was some kind of a lush because I was all rattled. We do this read through. The producer says, oh, well, we'll all get ready because we'll all be heading to Dallas in a couple of weeks. I said, what? They have winter in Texas. Dallas in January, you could have anything. So, well, we really feel that this is going to be one of the reasons the show is going to be successful. We're going to really be on the actual location. Mm-hmm. And of course, they had a record-breaking snowfall that January in 1978. We stopped production for 2 or 3 days at least for ice and snowfall. And Victoria and I did a scene The helicopter scene that's in the first episode, we couldn't fly the helicopter, so we did it in the snow, and we frolic in the snow and get in the truck, and it came back and it was beautiful, and we were very happy with our work. Everybody was. And then the network said, "What happened to the helicopter?" I thought, we're not doing winter, are we? So we did reshoot the whole thing. Anyway, this is Lorimar. This is for 5 episodes. I'm in them all. I had not worked for Lorimar at that point. They were an upcoming company. And I thought this was a good foot in the door kind of thing. And I never thought it was going to go as, I thought it was too different.
Yes.
I thought there's nothing like it on television, and this is not going to fly. And it didn't really fly, not very fast or high. It took almost 3 years for it to really develop the audience that it eventually had.
Is this right? The role of Ray Krebs was really much in demand, because I think I read somewhere that Ken Kercheval, who of course went on to play Cliff Barnes, he too wanted the role of Ray. Probably saw all those blondes and haylofts and cowboy boots and everything else, and it could almost have been a tussle for that role, couldn't it?
You know, he's a wonderful actor. He certainly would have done it a different way than I did. But we both were attracted to the role. It was a good role, and he ended up with a better role in the sense that he was always in the show, and they didn't have trouble figuring out what to do with Cliff Barnes. They did have trouble figuring out what to do with Ray Krebs sometimes. So that was, but and eventually they wrote that character out of the show after the 11th year. And it's largely because they didn't want to spend money on Western things and, bring the Wranglers in and stage all the cattle drives or that kind of stuff. They wanted to keep it more boardrooms and bedrooms, as they said.
Right. I always wondered what happened to Ray, because, yes, he left at the end of the 11th season, but then you came back for the final season.
Yeah, but it's pretty bizarre. I mean, Ray goes to Europe with his wife and an infant baby and a teenager.
Yes.
To do what?
And that was because you'd had an affair and you were trying to pacify your wife at that point in time, as I recall.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, there was a little slip up. Ray had a little slip up there. I remember that.
I'm guessing you kind of being a great lover of the Westerns and the kind of cowboy genre, you were probably thinking that Dallas on paper was to be a bit like a TV version of that wonderful movie Giant with James Dean and Elizabeth Taylor and Mercedes McCambridge and so on.
That would have been just fine with me. It was not quite that. It became something else, and everybody called it a soap opera. Well, I didn't like that very, very much. But, we had some really good storylines over the years, and we made so many shows.
Yes.
We really pumped them out. I mean, today, they make 10 shows, they call it a season. We made 40 shows one year. This is year-round working. And, I think there's a lot to be said for that. We touched on lots of different things. Was it the 7th year when Patrick left, or the 8th year? The eighth year. Also, Leonard Katzman leaves the show, the producer, at that particular time. So now, those of us that are remaining are saying, well, how about this for an idea? Or how about let's go in this direction? And Susan Howard had some ideas. I did. Other people did. And the show really changed a lot in that 8th year. But Larry was unhappy. He wanted Katzman back. He wanted Patrick back. And he got him back. And we, how do we get rid of that whole season, which I don't like at all? Larry says.
Yeah, the way Patrick came back, it's still one of those mind benders of all time, isn't it? Much love, because it's just so out there. For you, Steve, Dallas came along at just the right time. I think you'd said that things had been lean. Of course, you were married with kids, trying to keep a house going. And it was just one of those magic moments where you thought, do I continue with this biz or maybe do something else? And there was that phone call about this upcoming series, Dallas.
That's absolutely the truth. And so I think if you have a career or choosing a career in the film industry or as an actor, You come to moments like this, and even when you're successful, there's moments when you go, what am I really doing the right thing? Should I be going in a different direction? And we had a new house. I had one baby. We had another one on the way, and work had just slowed down. So suddenly, I was up for everything, but it would be, I was the second choice many times, and it's just how it goes. So when the 5 episodes from Lorimar came along, I was very pleased. Yeah.
As an actor, Steve, how do you deal with that rejection? I mean, it's the kind of situation most people in other jobs would never know about.
I didn't have any special skill for it, but I do always reflect on my year in Vietnam, and I was lucky to come out of that alive. And the very first day I got there, 3 guys died that got off the plane with me that morning. And so whenever anything was bad, or if I didn't get a role, or there was a particular challenge in my life that I had no control over, I would always go back and go, well, but look where you are. Look at how much you do have. So don't let this drag you down.
Think about Ray Krebs and the mischief that he got up to. I got to say, he had a fairly busy bedroom life, didn't he? Dated Lucy Ewing on the show. Did you love working with Charlene Tilton?
Yeah, Charlene is a close friend of mine over the years, and she was 17 when we were playing the scenes in the hayloft. And I probably could have been arrested for it, except it was Texas. The whole cast became like a family, and a lot of that was as a result of Larry. Larry saw that the best success chance was if we could all work as a team. So in the early stages of the development of the show, he said, what you need to do is do a lot of interviews, say yes, go on the television show, to take the press interview, and we'll all go out and do this, and we'll have an impact. This will help. And we really were kind of an ensemble company, and working closely together. Everybody cared a lot about each other. We lost Jim Davis to cancer in the 3rd year. Jim came to work bravely through all the treatment, and we were holding his hand and standing with him to the very end. And it was like a real family, because there was marriages, there was divorces, there was children being born. And one other little thing, Patrick and Larry and I all were married and with children of long standing. And we found that in common, and it was a thing that really kind of binded us together, I think.
And you think about the trajectory too of some of the people you'd worked with in the past, like Victoria Principal, you'd worked with in The Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean, spool forward however many years, and there you are romancing her Pam Barnes character. That must have been a lovely kind of reunion.
Yeah, well, it was very brief. It was just 1 episode, I think.
Yeah, but it was still there. It's still there. We still see it, Steve.
It was fun, and she had taken a break. Victoria had she decided that she didn't want to do pictures after all, and she was an agent for a while, a theatrical agent. And this role came along, and she saw it and as an agent, and said, "Oh, no, that's something I really want." So she went after it, and they had the good sense to go with Victoria as a first choice. I think she added a lot to the show.
Oh, she certainly did. And I think, if I'm correct, she retired from acting now years ago and is a philanthropist. She works rehabilitating animals. She has ranches here and there and is involved in a lot of humanitarian causes.
Yeah, and business. And, she's written several books and has a beauty healthcare products line. And so Hollywood is very much behind her at this point, I would say.
That's right. It's in the rearview mirror of her life. Ray married Susan Howard's character, of course, Donna Culver. And I know you two became kind of great friends, although I read somewhere that you'd bicker like an old married couple on the set from time to time.
Yeah, I had my real life, and
Yes.
then I had my stage wife. And many times one reflected on the other. But you know, Susan was a girl that had strong opinions on most things, and we would have little tiffs and work it out. But that was part of the charm of Ray and Donna, is that they were not like the rest of the couples in the story.
Are you still in touch with Susan these days?
I haven't talked to her in quite a while, but maybe she'll see this and we'll have a reunion.
And of course, Ray, ever the trooper, went on to marry Jenna Wade, played by Priscilla Presley.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell a funny story about Priscilla. So she comes to the show in about the 8th year or 7th year or sometime like that. And we're in Fort Worth, and we're working at a place called Billy Bob's. It's a big giant casino and bar and stadium. And lunch comes, and I said, let's all go over here to the Mexican restaurant, and I'll drive. And so we load up and we get over there and order lunch, and let's all have a margarita. Well, we had one margarita, and I was okay with it. But she had a margarita too, but she was not so okay with it. And we came back a little bit, well, more like a half hour late to report to work on the set. And there was a little bit of a hubbub about it, but this is our first day with Priscilla, and Patrick and I wanted to make sure that she was inducted in the proper way.
Well, I think, if I'm correct, and you tell me, Steve, or maybe he embellished, but the late, great Larry Hagman, did he not say at one point in time he was sipping through 5 bottles of champagne a day on the Dallas set, but he was never drunk because there was that word sipping, a little sip and another little sip and another, and 12-hour days, that's 5 bottles of bubbles, apparently.
Yeah, he eventually gave all that up, but that's true. He went through a lot of champagne.
Wowee. So Priscilla was entitled to one margarita just to get into the swing and spirit of things, I guess. What was she?
Yeah, that was the idea.
Yeah, of course it was.
She was a very sweet woman, and came with not a big, long list of acting experiences prior to this. So everybody kind of took her underneath their wing, and I think she did a very good job over the years. And when Susan left the show and Ray and Priscilla's characters were married, it was fun material to work on, and we remain friends today. Lisa's daughter, Riley, bought a house next door to me here in Ojai. So,
oh yes, Riley Keough. The rumors are, of course, that she's expecting another bub by surrogate.
Yeah, well, I'm waiting for her to come around because she bought the property right next door to my ranch, and I'm waiting for that day when I can go, hey, Riley, you know, I know your grandmother, and
yeah, and not only that. Speaking of fabulous Ojai, where you are living and your wonderful ranch, and we're thrilled to be zooming there to you today. But you were the one that got Larry Hagman and his wife Mai involved in Ojai, where they were residents for quite a long time.
Yeah, they had lived in Malibu Colony for quite a while, and my wife's family had a big ranch in Ojai called Twin Peaks, and we hosted a party and invited the entire cast and the production staff of Dallas to come up for this big gala party that we had. And Larry got interested in the Ojai Valley at that point, and started looking around at various parcels. And a couple of years went by, and he found one up high on this mountain that if I look out the window right here from where I'm seated, I can see right where the house is. He was just about 3 miles from where I sit. And he built this big, beautiful house that he called it heaven. It had a roof that opened up to the stars. It had a pool that could become a dance floor or pool, depending if you want to pull it across. This whole big thing of doors that were like 15 feet high, about 50 feet of them, that just all went away, and it all opened up to the Pacific Ocean. And and he had a helipad and a skeet shooting field, and just kind of went on and on. All the toys he ever dreamed of, he put in that house.
Yeah, I remember the wonderful Linda Gray told me that he was renowned for his absolutely incredible parties and that hot tub world like there was no tomorrow.
Yes, his wife was the hot tub designer, and she always would make them like grottos of some kind, and with these rocks and things, and they were quite something. What he used to say, a family that did not take jacuzzis together would not be able to stay together.
Look, I mean, he was just so iconic as J.R. Ewing, and he did live this wild and outrageous life. How did you personally find him, Steve?
Larry and I became very good friends over the years, and as did Patrick, and we all shared this common thing about enjoying the outdoors, fishing and hunting, and we did a lot of that together, which was very rare in the film business in Hollywood. So many times we were in Canada, salmon fishing or duck hunting, and we would do this on an annual basis, year after year, and quail hunting in Georgia. And it was this kind of thing that I would never have been able to do this on any other show in Hollywood at that time. But I had these two guys on the same show I'm on that like to do this. So I thought that was a real gift, and it was that kind of bonding really helps, I think, when you have a ensemble of actors, and you're reaching for those high moments, and now you've got all this other background experience. It really helps.
Yeah, you really were like the Three Musketeers of Dallas, weren't you? Barbara Bel Geddes, of course, as Miss Ellie, one of the greats of stage and screen.
That's right.
You loved working with her, and she left us, gosh, a while now, wasn't it? 2005, I think.
Barbara was a real gift. She was from old Hollywood in New York, and she had this kind of quality that it's hard to describe, but she was an artist, and most people don't know this about her, and she drew illustrations of barnyard animals and little rabbits, and that would go with children's stories. And this is something she really cared deeply about. And she living in Hollywood wasn't her first choice. So in the end, that's the thing that wore on her the most, I think, was she missed her home in New York, and she lived in the country, and that's not living down at the beach in Southern California.
And she created beautiful greeting cards too, I remember.
Yeah. She was very talented. Most of my years on the show, I just had very brief scenes with Barbara, but there was one show that after Ray finds out that Jock Ewing is actually his father. I have a scene with Miss Ellie. Ray has a scene with Miss Ellie. And it's the longest scene I ever saw in Dallas. It was 5 pages, and it was 2 characters. And, we spent pretty much the whole day on that scene, just that scene. So that was a real gift to me, I felt. I wanted off the show. They're not giving me anything to do. The only thing that was going to fix it is if something like, if I became a Ewing, that would make a big difference. So it was kind of Larry's idea.
That was a very emotional scene, Steve, because that's where it was revealed that you were Jock Ewing's illegitimate son. And of course, the inference there is that at some point in time, he'd stepped out on Miss Ellie, and just the way in which you two reconciled that astonishing personal bombshell was very emotionally and beautifully written.
Thank you very much. But like I said, it was a real pleasure to have that opportunity. And I wanted off the show. They weren't giving me anything to do. It was all about the oil business. And Larry said, no, don't leave the show. There's got to be some way. We've got to come up with an idea. And, so it's kind of Larry's idea. And together we pushed. And he says, well, if you, Patrick, myself, and Jim all stand together, you kind of look like you could be his son more than we do. So that was what we threw out there. And it took him a little while to decide to do that, because Ray had a relationship with Lucy, albeit short, but that would be an incestuous sort of relationship. And they waited a whole season to finally slip this in. But once that was in the storyline and Ray became a Ewing, my position in the show was solidified, and I had better storyline. Financially there were advantages, and I was a part of the show and not just like also ran.
You mentioned Jim Davis before, Jock Ewing, of course, and he passed away in 1981, just too ill to continue. I think he had some kind of cancer. But gee, what a career he'd had before Dallas too. He was one of those long-time character actors. You knew his face even if you didn't know his name. He'd done all sorts of incredible things, hadn't he?
Yeah, Jim had a nice story, a long story. He came to Hollywood and was sort of discovered for a Bette Davis movie, and that he had a lead role in, but it didn't go anywhere. And then he sort of kicked around and played various roles and supporting roles over the years. Sadly, he had a personal tragedy, and he lost his only daughter as a teenage person in an automobile accident, and then he went very much downhill for several years after that, and then was kind of coming back, and he did a movie called Comes a Horseman Wild and Free, and Jane Fonda was in it and a couple of other big name actors, and he had a very important, nice role in this movie, and he looked great. And the producers at Lorimar saw him and said, well, get that guy. He'd be good for like Jock Ewing. Look at him. Look at the jaw on that guy. Look at the hair, So yeah, from obscurity, he is rescued, and he comes on there and he gets to play this patriarch, Jock Ewing. He's got that big deep voice, and everybody's going kowtowing to him everywhere. He was over in England, and watching the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace, when the fans start going, Jock, it's Jock Ewing. Look, it's Dallas. Jock Ewing, it's Jock Ewing. And the guard says, Mr. Ewing, sir, if you could please just step inside the gate, please, so we could continue. And he came home and he told me this story on the Dinah Shore show, after we'd had a couple of drinks in the green room. And he said, God damn it, Steve. I knew I had finally blanking made it. Finally made it. There's a lot to that story, because it can happen like that. You can be around for 30 and 40 years, and then something happens, and what do you know? You're discovered, and you end up on a hot show like Dallas. So,
do you remember the craziest storyline your character was embroiled in, where even you thought, oh my gosh, this is stretching the believability? It's like that, Bobby Ewing and the shower scene, and suddenly he's gone, and then he comes back when he decided to return to the show and so forth. Did anything befall Ray Krebs like that?
No. I had a pretty good line of communication with the producers, and they knew where I wanted to go with this character, and they let me have a free hand in developing the character. And they were pretty true. There's a couple times when Ray goes off the deep end, but that's fine. I don't mind those kind of storylines. And but I never had any horrible episodes that I just hated doing.
Why did Dallas end, Steve? You think about it. It remains to this day enormously popular. The amount of people that write to you and love you and love reminiscing about the show and your character and so forth. It was still on a high. Why did it end?
Well, I think it's purely a business position. You don't need 12 or 20 years of a show when you have 6, because they're going to syndicate it if it's possible, and run them over and over again. So the shows become more and more expensive, and it's a financial thing more than anything else. In the 11th year, they let Linda Gray, myself, and Priscilla all out of the show. That's to save money. Did that help the show? I don't think so. It let them have a whole new set of storylines that might not have been it because they have a whole lot of new characters. But you know, I don't want to say anything terrible about Lorimar, but they're no longer in business. They had a couple of big hit shows, and something happened, and the shows live on, but not Lorimar.
Did you take anything of Ray's when your kind of character wrapped up and the show was over? Was there anything, a pair of cowboy boots, a hat?
Sure. Half the stuff you saw on the show was my stuff to begin with.
So you just took it back. You just
I just took it back. All the hats that I ever wore on the show were mine. And I got them personally from Resistol Hat Company in Garland, Texas.
Oh, they weren't Stetsons.
No, they were Resistols. And I wouldn't let them handle my jeans. And I wore Wranglers. I should have got a Wrangler contract, but I didn't, because they would press them, and then I'd be a cowboy that had press lines in his jeans, and I didn't think that was very good. And then all the boots I ever wore on the show were my personal boots because I had a contract with Justin Boot Company. Other than that, what did I take? I have some chaps that you wear, rodeo chaps. Those are pretty nice. And a couple of other small things like that. There wasn't really much to run off with.
You did the reunion movie, of course. That was War of the Ewings. Was it great to catch up with everyone again?
Yeah, that was. They had done. I think they did 3 movies altogether, and I was in one of them. And I hadn't. The agent called one day and said, "Hey, they got a nice part for you in the War of the Ewings, and they want you to come next month." And I said, "Okay, great." And it was a big paycheck this time, very nice paycheck. And Larry, I can't remember. Larry was not directing, but he was producing. And I had nice scenes with Patrick and Larry. And there's a big range war, I think, that goes on in that story. And there's shoot 'em ups, and there's a brawl, and it's fun stuff that we used to really eat up on, to do the stunts and go and throw punches and take falls and stuff like that. So I was very pleased to come back and do that.
And then, of course, in 2012, Ray Krebs was back in Dallas, the continuation, I suppose you'd call it. And Larry Hagman was back as well, but he was struggling with his health. And I guess what was just, really heartening to so many of his fans, he was just incredible. He would soldier on no matter how weak he got. He just kept going. It was like Dallas was his lifeblood in many respects.
Yeah, he was a hard worker. He was always a hard worker. And they didn't give me much of a crumb on that show. I barely showed up, but I would like to have been involved, but they chose a different direction and all new young characters and so forth. And I think they did 2 years. And Larry got through most of that second season. And then the cancer got him. He was very, very brave about it. And we went to a big party in his honor. I remember it was about 500 people there. And everybody told Larry Hagman stories.
He was a man, as you know better than almost anybody, with such an enormous charisma. Larry Hagman was larger than life. Do you ever feel him around you in any kind of vague way? Things that he might have said, you might hear, or you just feel his gargantuan presence in some way?
Oh yeah, you don't get over somebody like Larry Hagman. He's definitely a part of your life forever. I have. The other day we had a Dallas kind of reunion that was in June, and we did it in Palm Springs. And I took some things down there, and I came across this Hagman money. He had money made, $1,000 bills. That says "In JR We Trust."
Oh, we've got one right there too, Steve. Look at that.
You've got one, okay?
Yeah.
I could fake Larry's because he'd get tired of doing it. I could do it. he used to come out like and wave into the audience, and he'd reach in his pocket and start throwing out $1,000 bills like this. And he had this wonderful way about him, and he would always engage everyone. And we were lucky to be on the same planet with Larry. I mean, he was that kind of guy.
Away from your epic run on Dallas, a role that made you so loved, and of course a 51-year showbiz career, you're also a most revered watercolor artist.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, I still paint, and I have a studio. It's kind of out there. Can't quite see it from here. And I got into paint. I was always an artist from the time I was just a little boy, and was an art major in college. And then I let it go for a while, and then come back to it. And I started painting on locations, especially if you don't have anything to do that day. So you're filling up the dead time. And now I always have a little small sketch pad with me when we go on a hike, or anytime we go away on a weekend. Or I paint primarily watercolors that are transparent watercolors, and not big, but smallish things of scenes of mountains and trees and rivers and oceans and rocks and waves crashing and all sorts of natural things like that I'm interested in.
Do you have a gallery? Can people buy your works?
That I don't. I give my work away to charity, and I've done that for years. And at auction, I've made a lot of money for a lot of different charities.
You've been married to your wife, Brent, for, I think, 48 years, 1975. Tell me how you two met.
Going back to a gun club that I spoke about earlier in this interview, one of my clients brought his daughter with him one day. I didn't know this guy real well, but I thought he was kind of like a sharp guy. And I said, "That's not your girlfriend, is it?" I said to him. He said, oh, no, that's my daughter. Would you like to meet her? And I said, "Yeah, sure. What do you want?" He said, "Well, we'd like to shoot skeet today. Does she know what to do?" "No, not really." He said, "Well, maybe I can help you." And so I gave her a skeet shooting lesson. And at that point, Brent, my wife, was 19 and first year at USC University. And she shoots 18 out of 25, which is remarkable for any first-time student. And I'm totally impressed with her. And then she gets in the car and leaves. And I go, "Well, shoot, well, that was good, but what happens now? Will I ever see her again?" And I didn't know what to do. And it was like a month or 2 months, and they both came back out again. And I helped her shoot again. But that time I said, "Do you think maybe we could go out for lunch or something someday?" And she said yes, and that was the beginning of our dating. I think I took her out to dinner that night after I closed the gun range, and drove her home. So, but she was in college, and so we dated for off and on for 5 years.
Wow!
We got married after I did The Wind and the Lion.
Yes, and that was 1975. Where did you tie the knot, as they say?
We were married in Honolulu, and right next to the Outrigger Club in Waikiki Beach.
And here you are, 48 years later of wedded bliss, and you're both still smiling. That says a lot about things, Steve.
Yeah, we've been blessed. We have I have 2 daughters, both married to nice guys. I inherited these nice son-in-laws, and we have 4 grandchildren altogether, and they're at a nice age now. The 2 are 9 and 2 are 13. So they're all involved in sports and music and drama and things that are very interesting, and not too far away. They live in San Francisco. So they're either here or we're up there quite often.
Yeah, well, it's a beautiful drive either up there or from there down to UNO High, that's for sure. Any plans to do a memoir? I mean, just listening to so many rich and wonderful stories, and you recall them so vividly and tell them with such color. I really think a Steve Kanaly memoir would be a fabulous thing.
Well, you're very kind. I've had 1 or 2 other people approach me on the subject, but I don't have that plan at this point. And might have to be your show. You'll just have to tune in.
Well, I have to say, it has been really great to chat to you. I I knew from the moment we began chatting, the stories would flow and you'd have so much to say. And might I say, for those who missed it at the beginning, it was kind of subtle, but you do a very mean John Huston impersonation.
Wonderful, then. Let's have a drink on it, boys. My cheeks are hurting from so much laughing and smiling. Thank you.
And might I just say, a 10 out of 10. Here you are, a Zoom virgin, and you have passed with flying colours.
Okay, thanks, Craig. Thank you, Kelly.